look at the source of the yes. And the source of the yes comes down to the child. It's the very first instances. It's the very first yes of stealing. It's the first yes of dominating a conversation. It's the first yes of being late. That those yeses stem back to you being a child and doing those things. The Yoga Connection with Zorananda is a deep dive into the world of yoga, exploring the rich history of tradition, methodology, and practices both ancient and modern. Follow along as yoga is explored through solo episodes to guest interviews to understand its vast reach around the world. Hello and welcome to the Yoga Connection. My name is Zorananda, and today I'm diving back into Ashtanga yoga to go into the yama, Asteya. And so Asteya is simply non-theft or non-stealing. And there are three categories to consider here that I'm going to go into in this podcast episode, which is the theft of physical objects, the theft of time, and the theft of energy. So the most obvious in our life is the theft of physical objects. Essentially, this is something we're taught in childhood from our parents, teachers, or other authority figures, largely because stealing is illegal. It's not only a moral thing, it's a legal thing. And so there is a basic moral code that stealing is frowned upon in society, and generally it's something to avoid if you're going to grow up to be an honest, quote-unquote, honest person. I'm sure anyone listening to this has stolen something. And if you haven't, congratulations, you're a better person than I am. And so I'm sure you've stolen something in some small way, or maybe something significant, but I'm not here to judge. We're here to dive into practicing Asteya and practicing non-theft. So the moral code that we're brought up on is rooted in religious ethics, namely, thou shalt not steal, as given to humanity from the Ten Commandments through Christianity. And somehow this is something that has penetrated into greater society, regardless if you're religious or not. And that really has to do with it being a law, right? So not only is it frowned upon religiously, but it's also frowned upon in society legally, that, if you're going to steal, you run the risk of getting caught and being charged for theft, so on and so forth. So dignity and self-respect are usually the reasons why stealing is avoided. But when you're a kid and you really don't have the awareness of why it's important to have dignity, stealing is a thrill to experience because getting away with it feels great. And so this whole piece about dignity and self-respect, we want to feel like we respect ourselves and that we have dignity in what we do. But that's something that is learned. That's a skill. Dignity isn't necessarily an inherent thing. Self-respect necessarily isn't an inherent thing. Those are things that you have to work on for yourself. And so when we're kids, we don't have dignity and self-respect. I mean, look at any kind of toddler, 5-year-old, they're running around free. And you kind of have this wildness as a kid, and it's only through how you are educating yourself and how you're being educated are you going to learn about things like dignity and self-respect. I remember being a shithead kid and stealing things to impress friends. And so if I'm stealing to impress friends, where's the dignity in that? Where's the self-respect in that? Because I'm doing it out of this image that I'm going to be liked, or I'm going to like impress the other shithead kids that I'm hanging around with. So that, for me personally, it didn't really go far, because I got caught one day trying to steal candy from a local corner store, and my mom did something that impacted me to this day. So instead of reprimanding me, she took me to a different store and bought me whatever I wanted. And I remember her saying to me, "See, you don't need to steal. If you want something, just ask me and I'll get it for you." And so that right there is the teaching moment of dignity and self-respect. Because my mom was saying, hey, look, you shouldn't steal, and you don't have to steal. And so I gained a little bit of dignity there, because I wasn't reprimanded and I wasn't yelled at. I wasn't grounded. I wasn't abused in any way to then encourage a lack of dignity within myself, or to encourage anxiety around stealing, or encourage the thought that, like, if I do bad things, I'm going to be hurt from my parents. And so for my mom to take me and buy me a bunch of candy and be like, look, you don't have to steal. What you did was wrong, but it's okay. Just ask us if you want anything. That's her exercise of self-respect and dignity in that moment as well. That she has the dignity to teach me a lesson without abuse, without yelling at me, without grounding me, without making me feel like shit. And then the self-respect to kind of treat me as not just like this delinquent kid that's stealing all the time, but to see like, hey, this is my son and I want him to feel good, and to know that we're not poor, that he doesn't have to steal in order to get candy, right? So obviously, to some degree, I knew that. I can go to my mom and ask to get candy. But as we know, when we're kids and we just have this like crazy sugar addiction, we know that our parents are going to say no to us. We know that they're going to be like, no, I'm not going to buy you candy. Just like eat what we have here, right? And so I wasn't stealing because I couldn't buy it. It was for the thrill. I knew it. It was because I was doing something bad. I was doing something wrong. And I'm wanting to show my friend that I can do it. But I ended up getting caught. So, yeah, it was being with another delinquent kid and doing something bad because doing bad things is fun when you're a 10-year-old. Like, that's the reason, right? However, that moment still impacted me. And I made a decision that getting caught wasn't worth it. But that really didn't stop me from stealing. There are moments here and there where, for whatever reason, justifying taking something seems morally correct. And this is like the shift from, childhood stealing because you want to do it for a thrill, to like adult stealing because now you have like this faculty of reasoning for why it's justified, right? And, I'm not going to, dish out a whole laundry list of things where, I've taken something here and there. But the point here is that for some strange reason, an opportunity arises to weigh between stealing or not. And why is that? Our actions from the past carry through in cycles. We really can't escape the wheel that turns and repeats, and that is exactly what Asteya is addressing. The decision to steal will continue to come up in whatever degree, if that's a minor thing or a major thing. So if you're normalizing changing tags on clothes or barcodes, or lie about the weight of something in a grocery store, or pocket a candy bar, the karmic cycle of those actions will repeat. And so what I'm thinking about in this idea is if you're normalizing stealing little things, the opportunity to steal little things will come up periodically. And if you've become like a kleptomaniac and you're stealing large items and you're stealing lots of things, the opportunity to steal those larger things again and again will come up. And so you've created this cycle of stealing, and it's just embedded in you now. It's in your behaviors, it's in your personality. And so according to yogic philosophy, there are consequences and a balancing that must occur so little things will happen to you or big things will happen to you. It's not necessarily an eye for an eye, if I'm stealing someone's going to steal from me. It's more so just situational, where you have this energy in what you're doing. And so that energy is going to pull, and that energy of that cycle attracts little things to happen to you until you learn to end that cycle and commit to not stealing anymore. But what's the worst that can happen, right? So like you're thinking to yourself, I'm just stealing this little thing. Like, what's the worst that can happen? For example, say you're in a grocery store and you're in the bulk food section getting your favorite chocolate covered almonds. You see that the price has increased significantly. Because you're on a budget, you now can't afford those almonds. You have an idea. You see another item that is significantly cheaper. So when you go to write down the number, you write the number of the cheaper item. In order for this plan to work, you go through the self-checkout, and voila, you've paid significantly less for your favorite item. You think to yourself, what's the worst that can happen? This grocery store is owned by a billionaire. Who cares? They're ripping us off all the time anyways. And you know what? I've definitely done this many times. But I think the lesson here is, rather than skimming prices and making things cheaper and stealing, why not make more money? Why not be more successful? So that when things do get more expensive, it really doesn't matter, because you're getting more and more wealthy year after year. Though Asteya at first teaches to not steal because it can continue a negative karmic cycle, there is another level of becoming aware that when you decide to not steal, the realization of becoming more successful and wealthy is much easier to consider, because your mind is free to explore what it will take to make more money. You're not having to constantly think of ways to cheat and steal. Now you constantly think of how to make that extra $100 or $200 or $300 to afford the extra things without feeling anxious or insecure. So think about that for a second. We're in a society where rent is going up, bills are going up, food is going up, everything's getting more expensive, and our wages aren't. The minimum wage in both Canada and the United States are fairly low. There's some places in the United States where minimum wage is like $7, and minimum wage like here in Alberta is $15. And so when your rent is going up $100 or $200, your groceries are going up, 100%, like $200 or $300 more. Your insurance is like everything is starting to skyrocket, and and so it can be very tempting to think about, well, how can I make things like cheaper for myself? How can I pay less for things? And so the temptation of, well, I'm just going to skim here and there. I'm going to go to the grocery store. I'm going to take these things. I'm not going to ring them through. And you can get away with those things fairly easily. And in the moment, it feels great. It feels like you're sticking it to the man. You're like, yeah, fuck these people for doing this, right? But then what are you perpetuating for yourself as time goes on? What kind of person are you going to become later on down the road? Because I think that action of always skimming and always making things cheaper and always making it about how you're getting the short end of the stick and it's not fair for you, that there's this bitterness that grows in you. And the weird analogy that I have for this is like in Lord of the Rings, when Golem finds the ring, right? When Sméagol finds the ring, it slowly taints him over years and years and years for him to become from Sméagol to Golem, right? So just think about how as we age and we have this bitterness and we have this resentment of the world around us, and we're thinking about how we want to steal and cheat and get away with it, and only we know, right? No one else knows. And so like we're growing this quality within us, maybe without even really knowing it. We don't think about what it's doing to us psychologically and energetically, and slowly we become this whole other person that maybe after 20 or 30 or 40 years we're like a whole new person, but that whole new person, so to speak, is filled with resentment and bitterness and anxiety and anger. And so thinking about Asteya and thinking about not stealing is not only that you're refraining from doing something, that in that choice of refraining from stealing something and being honest and paying the fair amount, or what is seemingly fair, then you think to yourself, okay, well, if these things are getting more expensive, what can I do to make more money? And it's in that moment you have an opportunity to course correct, even if it's 1 degree of course correction, where you just have the thought, okay, I want to make more money, so what can I do to make more money? And it's in that moment then a seed is planted for you to then grow and explore what it will take to make more money. And rather than using your mind to crank out these scheme of ideas to make things cheaper, you then switch the energetic focus to crank out the ideas to make more money. So then if it's like, okay, well, I work full time at this place, I'm getting paid, whatever minimally, say for example, you're getting paid 18 or whatever, $19 an hour. And you're like, well, I live in this 1-bedroom apartment, I have a roommate, or I live in a 2-bedroom and I have a roommate, and I generally have my bases covered, but because everything is rising, I'm having to use my credit card more, I'm having to apply for another credit card, and like that one's getting maxed out, and so this anxiety is building. It's like, okay, well, if I'm going to get a part-time job, that's going to take up time, right? That's going to really put me in this situation where I have to start understanding time management, and I have to start looking at my life and thinking about what I'm putting my energy towards. And so if I already have a full-time job and I'm getting paid this certain amount each month, if I really want to be able to afford the things and the lifestyle that I had, because you don't want to change your lifestyle. You don't want to downgrade your lifestyle, right? People are on the path of success and wealth, and they want to increase their lifestyle. They want to know that they're becoming more and more successful. And so to then think about the things that we do and where we're spending money and, what we're spending our time on, we can look at, well, I technically do have a few hours, maybe 1 or 2 nights a week where I can pick up a job. Like for me personally, I teach yoga on the side. And so in August, I started teaching yoga again, and that takes up quite a bit of time. Tuesdays, Fridays, and Saturdays, I'm teaching 2 classes per night. And especially on the Friday and Saturday night and day, I can't do anything on a Friday night. There's plenty of times I'm getting invited to things, or events come up, or friends want to hang out, and I just have to say no because I'm going to be exhausted. I start at 7 a.m. on Friday when I go to work. I get home at about 4 o'clock. I have an hour to chill, and then I'm going straight to the studio to teach at 5:45 and 7 p.m. And then I'm going home, eating, going to dinner, waking up at 6 the next day. And so there is this sense of sacrifice where you have to look at your schedule and you have to look at what you're doing. And if you've normalized, well, I have my full-time job, but I come home and I just like do absolutely nothing. I just like scroll on my phone. I watch TV, that there's something to consider with what it will take to take on another part-time job or something just to make that extra bit of money. And when I look back at my life, I feel grateful for my past self for doing the teacher trainings that I did back in 2012 and 2016, because now I'm in a position where I'm like, yeah, I'm making a good extra bit of money a month so that I can supplement for the increased cost of things. And so it really comes down to a shift of state of mind where rather than being angry and upset and bitter and have resentment to the system, you shift to being optimistic and positive and say, you know what? I believe in myself and I'm capable of doing more. It just means refinement. It just means refining my responsibilities. And so I don't have this childish outlook where, like, I think to myself, oh, I've already worked all day. I don't want to go to another thing. Or, you know, like, I want to do this and I want to do that. It's like you have to set aside that adolescence. You have to set aside that child in you that complains about all that stuff. And you have to show up as your own parent and as your own adult and say, you know what? I've got fucking bills to pay. I've got debts. I want to travel. I want to save money. I want to invest. And so I can't listen to the voice of the adolescent anymore. I can't listen to the voice of the child anymore that's sabotaging things for me. And that's really where all of this like stealing comes from. Think about when we learn to steal. It's when we're kids. And so if we continue to steal, we are continuing the actions and the decisions from the child that did it. And so we have to look at our behaviors as the adult we are and say, enough is enough. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not stealing anymore. I'm going to act on what is integral for me now, and I'm going to make sure that I'm managing my time. And so when I look at my weekly schedule, sure, I'm working full time, say, 8 to 4:30 or 8 to 5 or whatever, or 9 to 5. And then when I'm coming home, I'm making sure that I'm doing something a little bit extra so that in a month, I'm making at least an extra $300, at least an extra $400, $500. And that is going to be so much more helpful, because what you'll find is that when you are in the path of refinement, your diet will change, because you'll start looking when you go to the grocery store, you're going to be like, why am I spending an extra $40 on all these snacks? Why am I spending an extra $10, $15 on all these sodas? Why am I spending money on all this extra stuff? I cannot buy those things, and that's more money in my pocket, because you don't actually need to eat that stuff. You can be very well fed and covered by whatever meats you buy, whatever veggies you buy, whatever eggs you buy, bread and fruit, and then all the extra filler stuff is money spent that doesn't have to be spent. And so the decision of non-stealing now comes in like two ways, because then you're deciding not to take things because of a lack and a fear of what's the word? I can't even think of the word here. So you're deciding not to steal because of scarcity, because you no longer feel that you have this scarcity, and you're not allowing these companies to steal from you, from convincing you that you need those products and to convince you that you need those things. And so then they're not taking from you, you're not taking from them. Cycle ended. And so this moves into stealing time, because the decision to make more money for yourself and the decision to uphold Asteya, and so you're not stealing objects anymore, you're not stealing from stores, you're not stealing from people, and you have this now demeanor where you're taking control of your responsibilities, and you're no longer being directed by the child and the adolescence, and you're being your own parent and adult, that now you're considering things under the guise of or under the view of time management. So Now it's time to think of, where am I stealing time? And it's much more common than you'd actually think. And it typically falls into two camps. Namely being overtly dominant in conversations and being late all the time. So I'm sure we all have that friend that just won't stop talking. Not only that, they'll cut you off when you are talking or completely takes over a conversation to talk about something else. Essentially, they're stealing time and they don't even know it. This part of Asteya is psychological, so it goes unnoticed. If it is noticed, it's much harder to change because there's really no consequence to it. Unlike stealing physical things, there is a consequence. It's illegal stealing someone's. So they have no problem taking up all the time in the world to talk about their stories and ideas. So with the practice of Asteya, you become much more concise in your speech. You know when to end stories, you know when to pause and allow for others to add to the conversation. You realize that it's not all about you. I think of speaking like I'm conveying an essay. If you're largely unaware of how you're speaking, you may speak in a way that would look like a 12-year-old's paper, full of run-on sentences, poor punctuation, and excessively large paragraphs. However, a mature student knows proper structure and will convey their ideas precisely with an economy of words. But usually there's pushback around this whole idea because most people who overshare feel like they're being told to shut up or change who they are. But applying Asteya in this context is all about refinement. The way personality shines through storytelling won't be hindered by thinking about what you're going to say and deciding to execute the conversation with elegance. And so this kind of for me is a big one because I know I have quite a few people who are oversharers or are overtalkers, and so I think generally we can all kind of empathize with this experience. And I think it's important to have the self-awareness to really think about what you're talking about and what you're saying, so that when you do share and you're conveying, that you are aware of your audience. And I think this is what happens to a lot of oversharers, is that they're talking and talking and talking, and all of their focus is inwards. All of their focus is in their head on the idea that is happening, that gives them the context for what they're saying, and they're just so hyper focused on what's happening inside their head, where there's almost a glaze over their eyes, where they're almost not even seeing the people around them. And I have not quite a few, but I have several friends in my life, or at least 2 or 3 that I know do this. And without naming names, I just want to tell one story, which I think is, to me, hilarious. And it's one of these moments that taught me not to do this and to really be aware of the people around that I'm speaking to actually, and what I mean by be aware is look at their eyes, look at their faces, look at their expression, know what they are conveying to you non-verbally. This is really going to be helpful for you to convey your idea, stop, pause, let them add to it, hear what they have to say, and have an engaging exchange of conversation, right? And so I have this one friend, he's a good friend of mine, and this was quite a few years ago, where I had this event happening in my house called Dance Temple, and so I had all these friends over, and we have DJs play and we dance, and I see my friend talking with this woman, and they like he's so close to her face, because there's like there's this whole Seinfeld episode of like the close talker, where like anytime Jerry's talking to this one guy, the guy like comes right into his face and is talking. So I'm seeing my friend talk to this person, and he's super close to their face, and he's just talking and talking and talking and talking and talking and talking. And I see my other friend who's standing there, eyes kind of wide, just nodding in approval, nodding and saying little things here and there, like, oh yeah, yeah. And I leave. I come back 10 minutes later, and he's still there, still talking to this person, but the look on their face now has totally changed, and they just look drained. They look exhausted. And I remember in that moment, I just laughed to myself. I just laughed. And I was like, oh my goodness. He doesn't even realize what he's doing right now. He doesn't even realize that this other friend has totally checked out. They've totally checked out. And he's just blabbing on and on and on and on and on and on. And I find he has a tendency to do this, that he in his storytelling, there's definitely room to make things a lot more concise and to take this whole drawn out story and to condense it. But I think when you develop yourself in a particular way to be a storyteller, and especially if you have this like particular kind of personality of inflating your stories and inflating kind of who you are, that it gets kind of addictive. Like it feels really good to portray yourself in this certain way. And so that moment, I I looked at that and I was like, this is a great opportunity for me to see what not to do, and to see how Asteya comes into play of like, oh, he's totally taking time from her, right? Like totally taking time. And so I made a decision to remember that and to think to myself like, oh yeah, I'm going to be mindful. And so that when I am telling stories and I'm engaging a conversation with someone, that I'm going to only speak what's necessary and give myself breaks, because I also don't want to be talking and talking and talking and talking and talking. I think that it plays into the energy side of things, but I'm going to go into the second part of this, of being late. And so now the time management of things, of what it means to takes someone's time, or to kind of steal someone's time by making them wait for you. And obviously there's wiggle room if there are unforeseen circumstances that cause delays, but there are folks who are perpetually late, and it all comes down to time management and prioritization. This one can be tricky because chronically tardy people will say that they were prioritizing their mental health or something that was more important to themselves. And obviously this can come off selfish, and sometimes it's justified, like I was saying, if it's an unforeseen circumstance and the person's like, I'm so sorry, I'm not usually like this, and something came up, and as long as they can communicate it in some way where, you send a text message or you call, or if you do just show up late, that there's a way to convey your apology that is respectable. But it's usually turned around on the other person waiting, that they are selfish for not understanding. And like I've said in the last two Ashtanga episodes, the yamas work in tandem with each other. So upholding Asteya and not stealing time from another person is also being honest with yourself. When you're honest with yourself, you can objectively look at your actions and recognize the changes you can make. And being honest with yourself means you respect yourself, which then turns into respect for others. And once you act on respect, time management is much easier. You want to manage your time because you want to be respectful. And this leads wonderfully into not stealing energy. But I want to look at this like stealing of time thing. I think we just can't help but be selfish, right? So we want to think of our habits and our behaviors generally as beneficial things, right? And so especially when it comes to chronically being late, that whatever reason that there is to be late, that's a reason that's been upheld for years. And usually that reason is tied to behaviors and tied to like identity and personality. They kind of like identify themselves as someone who can't get their shit together. They have some kind of like wording in their mind or some kind of mantra that they speak to themselves, like, oh, I just can't help it. I can't help but be late because blah, 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 right? I'm just so scattered. I can't get organized. And so it's like this self-fulfilling prophecy and this perpetuation of behaviors. Like I said earlier, that it all really has to do with maintaining these childlike behaviors, that the selfishness of doing your own thing and making people wait. I think some people just kind of get a kick out of it too. Like they like that someone's waiting on them, and so it makes them feel more important. And so then they'll say to themselves like, oh, I had this important thing to do, and so I had to make you wait. And so then just even inside their mind, then thinking that, oh, I have there's this person waiting on me. It's like that there's this like sense of like hierarchy to it, that they're on this like greater or higher order of things. And so they're like, well, I've got to go do this thing first. I know we've agreed to meet up at 12, but this thing's more important and I've got to go do that. And you're just going to have to wait. Right. And so in that selfish attitude, there's also a lack of respect. That one is really important to examine, and why Asteya is important as a practice. Like, and I said it before, right? It has to do with self-respect. And so self-respect then turns into respect for others. And so Asteya and non-stealing is not just about, oh, I'm not taking. It's then, oh, I'm not taking because I am respectful. And so being respectful of someone listening to you speak is honoring the energy they are putting into attention. So this is how this leads into not stealing energy, right? So I'll say that again. Being respectful of someone listening to you speak is honoring the energy they are putting into the attention. They're putting their energy and attention into you. And if you're blabbing on, the person will eventually start feeling drained. They're going to feel like their energy is being taken. And likewise with not being late, the effort that went into setting up the meeting or date or whatever takes energy. And then just to wait around takes energy. And so it's important to consider these things, and that's what makes this a practice. It's something that you've got to do daily, and it can be challenging because you are changing some of the fundamentals of your behaviors. You're changing some of the fundamentals of your personality and what you identify with. So if you've identified with someone that's chronically late, you've identified with being someone that steals, that takes things, if you are identified with that, to then start to make the decision that you're not going to do that, you're up against years of programming that you've done to yourself. And the years of programming are all the decisions and actions that you've taken over, who knows, years and decades, that now you saying no to something you've said yes to, all of that yes is cemented into your brain. There's literally neurological pathways that support all the memories and all the decisions of you saying yes to stealing, you saying yes to taking time, taking energy, you saying yes to not respecting others and not respecting yourself. So as soon as you say, no, I'm not going to steal. No, I'm not going to take up someone's time. No, I'm not going to be dominant in this conversation. You are now looking at decades of all the yes. So I like to imagine that when you've done something habitually and you have this behavior that you've said yes to for years and years and years, that the yes is like huge. It's a massive yes. It's like a big brick house. And the no, as soon as you say no to it, the no seems so tiny in comparison, because it's this one little no that's up against this huge yes that you've built into this massive fortress. And so you've got to realize that instead of looking at the yes as this big impenetrable thing, you look at the source of the yes. And the source of the yes comes down to the child. It's the very first instances. It's the very first yes of stealing. It's the first yes of dominating a conversation. It's the first yes of being late. That those yeses stem back to you being a child and doing those things. And so now the no can inflate into the adult. It inflates into the bigger no of the no that knows better and is coming from a place of your own parenting, your own adulthood, and your own ability to take control of the situation. So that no is the authority. And so then you look at the yes, which is coming from the child, and the yes becomes so much smaller. And now you're going, no, not to the things. You're saying no to you inside yourself. And that's where things shift. That's where then you can be really empowered to continue this new pattern, to make these changes. And so this is a little bit off topic, but I realized that scenario right there by deciding not to smoke anymore. I grew up as a chronic. I started smoking weed when I was 12 years old, and I continued pretty much all my life. There's one period when I was 28 where I took a 2-year break, and then I started up again at 30, and I didn't stop until literally last year, till I was 36 years old. And so when I made the decision to finally stop, this is what I realized. I was like, what am I saying no to? I'm not necessarily saying no to the weed and to the smoke. I'm saying no to the thing inside me that says yes all the time. The thing inside me that caves in and says, oh, I need it because of this and this and this. And so the layers of no was, I don't want to get high anymore. I just don't want to smoke. I don't want to dehydrate my body. I'm getting back into teaching yoga. I don't want to keep damaging my lungs. I am getting back fully into my practice. I'm doing a lot of breath work. I want to do the healing. Then the deepest one was, I'm saying no to the child that said yes. I went all the way back to my 12-year-old self that said yes that day with my few friends that smoked weed for the first time. And I said, you know what? We've had a hell of a journey together. We've said yes to this thing for 20 plus years, 25 years almost. It's time to say no. And as soon as I made that decision, that is what happened to me. This huge, overwhelming monster of a yes was like, you don't have the power over me. I have the power over you. Until I realized I'm talking to a child. And I was like, actually, I'm the adult here. And so I think this is really valuable in this case as well, when we're looking at some of the more minor things in our life, like, yeah, going to a grocery store and being like, well, I don't want to pay this amount for this thing, so I'm just going to change the tag. And I've done this. I've done this shit. I've gotten angry at the price increases of like a fucking sandwich. And I'm like, oh my God, why is this sandwich $8 when it was $4 like 6 months ago? How does it go up double in price, right? And I straight up switched the tag. I went and found something else and I scanned it and I was like, yeah, I'm not going to pay it, right? But the shifts that I've made in my thinking when it comes to scarcity and when it comes to abundance, I'm now thinking, oh, well, instead of griping about the cost of things, why don't I just make more money? And so then the question arises, how do I make more money? And I've had this conversation with plenty of people, and I get the same response that as soon as I tell them make more money, immediately their internal scarcity and fear comes up, and they're like, well, no, things should just be cheaper, right? Like it immediately rubs them the wrong way. And so to me, that is a sign that I would rather make the shift for myself to make more money and then be around the people that think the same way, where they're like, yeah, fuck yeah, let's fucking make an extra bag, like let's really do the work so that we're much wealthier. Then to spend time with people who are like, no, like I shouldn't have to make more money. Like things should be cheaper. Like they should make things cheaper. It's like, you got to understand the world that we're in and the way that the system works. It's not geared towards making things better for the like unfortunate, like the ones that are going to be in poverty pretty much are going to stay in poverty. And this seems like a pessimistic view or a nihilistic view. But the thing is, for you to make things better for other people, you really have to find what it takes to make it the best for you. And so that when you can change the outcome of your life, and when you can apply something like Asteya, and you can apply these yamas, and you can change your behaviors, and you can find it within yourself to level up, that you then create your own system to make the lives of other people better, so that you don't have to go into the corrupt system and try to change it. You are creating a system that is uncorruptible. And it's because the system that is corrupted can't sneak its way in and corrupt you, because you are the one that's building the mainframe of the system that is uncorruptible. And this really starts to bring awareness of a spiritual war that is at play here in this realm that we're in. And so when you start to bring awareness to who you are as a being, so why you are the human that you are, why you are on this path of self-realization, and why you're taking up yoga, and why you have these practices, why you're listening to this podcast, is because there's a seed that's being planted, and there's seeds that have been planted that are growing, that create the network for you to start to understand how you are an empowered person. And in that empowerment, the systems that are being created and the structure that's being created has a defense mechanism in place, so that the world around you cannot intervene in what you are creating for yourself. And by all means, that world will try to intervene. And that is the spiritual war, is that the levels to it is that once you can get out of the scarcity, once you get out of the programming that has been imposed on you to try to keep you in the realm that you're in the mundane world, that once you can break through that, you enter another level where you're recognized as basically being on the same playing field, where the kind of evil in the world looks at you and they're like, oh, okay, you know what you're doing, so we're going to lay off. We're going to regroup, And we're going to let the next level that you're going towards then try to influence you. And this is what makes living where we are and how we are really a giant game. And so when we look at things like the yamas and niyamas, these are the attributes to then equip yourself for this game to be even more successful. So when you're looking at, say, the last three that we just went through, ahimsa and satya and asteya now. Ahimsa, non-harm. So you are taking on this tool of non-harm, so you don't want to harm people. You take on the tool of satya and truthfulness so that you're honest. You take on the tool and the attribute of asteya and of non-stealing. And like I've said in all of them, it's in multiple realms. It's in the physical realm. It's in the emotional, mental realm. It's in the energetic, spiritual realm. And you are developing your armor. You're developing yourself in a way so that you can handle the world around you. And so that when you see the evil that's being done, you see the way that homeless people are being treated. You're seeing how people around the world are being affected by war and famine and drought and natural disasters and plagues, and you name it. There's all these things happening, that you have this presence and you have this aura to say, you know what? I've put myself in a place where I'm not affected by that. I don't live in a third world country where I have to worry about bombs. I don't live in a place where I have to worry about 100,000 homeless people basically outside my door, like say in like LA. I don't have to worry about crazy natural disasters. Like living in Edmonton, Alberta, I don't have to worry about earthquakes, about massive flooding, about massive fires, about typhoons or hurricanes. I just worry about the cold. Like we get a cold snap, but when I look at the life that I've created for myself and the decisions that I'm at, like sitting in this room right now doing a podcast, my only concern is that my freaking heater turned on and it's blasting heat above me. And I'm like, do the people hear that my freaking heater turned on? Like that's the extent of my worries. And it's really because of the decisions that I've made to put myself here. And really in the last 10 years is I have this yoga practice to thank. I have all these tools and these attributes that I've embedded into my psychology, that I've embedded into my behaviors to then allow me to appreciate where I am. And so that I can see that I've been the architect of my life and that there's a sense of awareness of who I am as a being because of that. And taking that and going forward and being like, okay, now how do I look at where I'm at and grow from here? And this is where the continual maintenance of Ashtanga yoga in all of its practice, and so in this case the yamas and niyamas, and particularly the yamas, that I look at them and I say, okay, as long as I continue practicing these things, as long as I uphold these fundamentals, I am going to shape my life for the better and better and better of who I am and what I'm doing. And because it's a spiritual war and there's a spiritual battle, I'm going to have setbacks, and that's okay because I'm going to make mistakes along the way. And those mistakes are to inform me of where to refine my actions. And it gets to the point where, like I was saying, when you look at time management and you look at your energy management and you're making these decisions like, okay, I'm not going to steal any time anymore, right? So me deciding to do this podcast right now, there was a part of me that was like, you know what? I should do it another day. That thought is stealing time away from me, and it's in my own action. It has nothing to do with anyone else. And so when you start to look at these practices, it starts to get really subtle, and it starts to look into self-sabotage, because I have already been sabotaging myself by not putting out podcasts over the last month, right? I think my last one was in December with John, and I've been telling myself for the last couple weeks, oh, I need to do a podcast, but then something will come up. I'll think of something to go, no, I'm not going to do it. And look at how much time has gone by. And so I have taken that time away from me. I can't get that time back anymore. And so then today I was like, that is enough. I'm going to do this. And so I sat down, wrote out my outline. And, even though it was getting later and that part of my brain was telling me, you know what? You have to wake up at 5:00 tomorrow to go do CrossFit. Like, are you sure you want to do this podcast? It's going to be later and you won't have the quote unquote free time to do the things that you want to do in the evening. And it's like, well, but this is what I want to do. And that's the important thing to really understand in how you create the new patterns and the new cycles and the new karmas to propel you forward in what you're doing. And, coming to the end of this, I'm now feeling like super grateful I did it. And I know that there's going to be some of you who listen to this who get great benefits from this. You're going to hear this podcast and you'll be like, wow, you know what? That put things into great perspective. And I really hope that it does. I can't say that, everything that I say is full of wisdom, but I like to do my best in conveying the philosophies and these ideas in a concise way so that it does make sense and it's something that you can take on as a practice without the fluff, without the new age spiritual side of it. I want to make things sort of scientific and sort of philosophical and, to really package it in a way where you can come out of this feeling like you've been energized rather than feeling like you've been drained. And that's why I keep things at an hour, because I can blab on, right? But, if I'm going to take my advice, I'm going to end the podcast here and choose my economy of words and consider that I think I've said everything that I have said. So if you aren't aware, if you're new to this podcast, I am a musician as well. I've been releasing new singles on Spotify and YouTube and iTunes or Apple Music. So please go check out the music. My artist name is Zorananda, Zorananda. Again, you can find it on Spotify. I'll have all the links in the description. Check out past episodes of this podcast. I'm more than 50 deep by this point. Check out my social media. I'm much more active on my music page right now than I am on my yoga page. But again, links will be in the description. But they are zorananda.music and Yogi Zorananda. And check out my website, zorananda.com. Again, that has mainly my music on there. I'm in the process of kind of figuring out how I want to do some music packages. I have this whole idea of how I want to brand myself and what I want to offer. And one idea is to offer what it takes to write your own music. That if you're a cover artist and you've learned a lot of songs but you don't know how to make your own music, I'm going to make some content around that. And I will get to making some packages for yoga as well. And so feel free to message me on Instagram or to email me on my website. I do love interacting with the folks that message me from this podcast. So thank you for listening. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Enjoy.